birthday, Bhagavad Gita. The joys of live video. At least I have some confetti. Woo! It's Gita Jayanti, which means happy birthday, Bhagavad Gita, one of the classic yoga and wisdom texts of the ages. And may I say also, a happy birthday to you. What? You might say, but it's the Gita's birthday. It might not be my birthday. So why are you saying that? Well, the Gita is really a story about you. So this book that's been written is a story of your life. And we'll talk about that today. Who am I to talk about that? My name is Laura Atmadarshan Santoro, and I am the author of a couple original translations of the Bhagavad Gita. And what makes them unique, I think, is that they're in English, but they're in the original poetic verse. And you'll get to hear some of that today. If you have your own books, you might want to grab them, especially the Hearing the Song of Your Soul book, if you have that, or perhaps the Understanding the Song of Your Soul, although it's in the front of Embracing the Song of Your Soul as well. So let's talk about this. The idea of a birthday. Well, we'll start with, what is the Bhagavad Gita about anyway? I said it's about you, and it is. It's appearing to be, though, about someone named Arjuna, who represents you. He is an exiled prince. He has been kept from doing what he really not only wants to do in life, but was born to do in life. He's been a wanderer, and now he finally has a chance to regain his kingdom. His elder brother had the kingdom usurped from him, and Prince Arjun is ready to set things right. But there's a challenge. For Prince Arjuna and his whole family to fully live their destiny, someone's going to have to die. This is portrayed in the Gita as the start of a horrific civil war. But the Gita, as we've already talked about a little bit, is symbolic. So these deaths are symbolic of what will happen to you when you give up your exile from what you're meant to do in life, from what you were born to do, and take hold of your future with both hands. So maybe you don't have to kill people. I hope not. Maybe people don't have to kill you, but things are going to have to die. Your relationships with others may die. That's symbolized in the Gita by killing. You're perhaps cutting people out of your life because they're no longer serving you. And each character in the Gita represents an aspect of yourself that can get in the way of you realizing your destiny. Also, and the thing that scares Arjun, who again represents you, the most is what in him might need to die. Or we could say another word for that, change. What has to change in his life? Because even though the past few years of his life have been difficult, they've settled into a rhythm, a routine. When Arjun takes control of his destiny and his kingdom, he's going to be busy. And he's going to be busy dealing with other people and their demands and interacting with them. And from morning till night, all that will be on his mind is his job, his career, his destiny. And when we find our destiny, part of us will have to die or change in that same way. Because when we grasp it, suddenly it's going to take over our life, which sounds good in theory. But then when that burning passion gets a hold of you, your routines will change and you will have to deal with people. You'll have to set boundaries. You'll have to listen to what they say because your destiny is never carried out in a vacuum. It can only be achieved with the help of others, and in achieving your own destiny, You are serving the world. And I know that sounds a little like, could it be true? And this is exactly what Arjuna, you, are facing at the start of the Gita. Arjun is ready to grasp his destiny. He's fully prepared, but this idea of change and deaths, little deaths in his life, are scaring him, and he's wondering if he should go ahead with what he has planned. Fortunately, he has a very good friend, his cousin and spiritual advisor, Krishna. Krishna represents your core being. So if I say Arjun represents you, it's more that he represents, in a way, your ego, your idea of who you are, which can change over the course of life, your idea of who you are. Like right now, Arjun isn't exile, he is a wanderer, but he's meant to be a prince. What has to change for you? That's the challenge. And Krishna is the part of you that is your true self, that doesn't change, no matter what you go through. So, for example, if Arjun is becoming a prince, his ego might get big and fat. He might go, now I am better than others. Now I should be treated differently, and I should have the ability to treat others differently. Whereas the Krishna, the true self within, will recognize that even though outer circumstances change, who you really are doesn't change. And this can lead to compassion for others, because if their outer circumstances change, it doesn't mean they're any more or less of a person than they were before. So I'm going to start with just a little short verse from the Gita. And if you have a book, I'll be in chapter 4, verse 5. And if you don't, that's fine. You can listen. And if you find it beautiful, on my website, welcomingdestiny.com, under resources, there's a tab called Song of Your Soul. And if you look down on Hearing the Song of Your Soul area, there's a free chapter that you can download and read and really get the rhythm for. All right. But you are welcome to listen, even if you have the book. So this is Krishna representing your soul, talking to Arjun, your limited idea of yourself. Arjuna, you and I have had many births and many deaths. I remember them all, but you do not remember, scorcher of foes. Scorcher of foes is another name for Arjun. It's said that when he goes into battle, nothing can stand before him, like he's a raging forest fire. So if he makes this choice, nothing will be able to stand before him. And when you make the choice to embrace your destiny, I know it sounds strange, but nothing will be able to stand before you as well. And the verse itself, could it be read as the idea of reincarnation? It could be. But if we're looking at it as applied to your life, remember, each little change in your life or each big change in your life is like a death. So when you were a child, maybe you had a ritual that marked coming to a certain age, like a quinceañera or a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, or a communion, a special communion. And it supposedly, like other transitions in your life, marriage, for example, getting your first job, marks these steps. And when I was young, I thought, wow, just when I go through these steps, I'll be a different person. I'll know everything. I'll be able to deal with the world. I'll feel better about myself. So that's the idea of Arjun and these little deaths he goes through, the little deaths we all go through. And what happens is sometimes we buy into that idea of, I will be different. So we try to make ourselves different. We try to act different. Maybe it includes putting a shell on so that we're not as vulnerable to the world. or cutting ourselves off from opportunities. But what Krishna says is, Arjun, when you go through these changes, sometimes you forget who you really are. You take on a mask. I always act spontaneously, no matter what change happens in life. I remember who I am at my core. Valuable lesson. And this can be hard because we may have been told that who we are isn't good enough. And if you read any of the stories of Krishna, he definitely does not have that idea about himself. He's good enough no matter what happens around him. He is good enough. So if you're looking at births and birthdays, every day could be a birthday for you. Because every day you could choose to move toward your full true self, take a step toward your destiny, birth the life and person that you want to be. Of course, that does include deaths. But for example, this morning I woke up and I did my usual, which included trying to tame my hair, which is an ego thing for me. When I look at the pictures of all my relatives, their hair is everywhere. So getting it anywhere close to my head is a triumph. But then I do things like go live or teach, and I forget about that. And I try to tame it, and it never works. So maybe one day, maybe tomorrow, I'll wake up and instead of going through this fight with my hair, of all things, I'll just go, that is my hair. And that's how it's going to be. We could do this with the way we dress, with the way we act. Every day we could get up and instead of defaulting to our own patterns, we could have a new birthday, creating the self that we know we are inside, getting closer to our true self, the Krishna within. And I'd like to note that some of these concepts might be foreign, or I might be saying things that I think are perfectly understandable, and you may have a question. The chat is open. If you wish to ask a question, or if you are watching this later, feel free to comment with questions or observations, and I'll be happy to respond. That's part of the joy of the Gita. It's a dialogue. It's not just Krishna teaching. Arjun gets to ask questions and say, wait, I don't get this. Can you say it again? And Krishna will repeat it as often and as compassionately as necessary. So we'll have another reading, and this will be from chapter 2. And in this chapter, it's very close to the start, you notice. Chapter 1 is Arjun's having these problems. What do? I'm going to have to change. I'm going to have to let go of old relationships, old ways of living. I don't want to. Can I do it? I don't know. And he's in a turmoil. And in the second chapter, Krishna starts talking to him from the heart. And right away, he says, the most important thing you need to understand is who you are. And to describe that, Krishna talks about the self with a capital S. Okay, the true self, as opposed to the little s self. Arjun could be thought of as the little s self, and Krishna is your truest self. And he's got a message for you about this self. Well, if you'd like, in chapter 2, verse 23 of the poetic translation. Okay. So remember, this is about, oh my gosh, I'm going to make a change and I'm going to lose myself. I'm not going to care about my hair anymore and I'm going to lose myself. People won't want to be in my classes or watching my videos because my hair will be everywhere, and this might seem trivial, but a lot of the things we think about ourselves could be just as limiting and just as small. Let's hear about the true self. Verse 223. You may listen or chant along at any time if you've got the rhythm. Weapons cannot cut up this self, and fire cannot burn up this self. Water cannot make this self wet, and wind cannot make this self dry. It cannot be cut nor be burnt. It cannot be wet nor be dried. It is eternal, everywhere, fixed, primeval, immovable, unmanifest, unthinkable, unchanging. It is said to be, therefore knowing it to be such, it is not fitting that you grieve. Now if you think of it always as taking birth and then dying, even then, O mighty armed one, it is not fitting that you grieve, for death is certain for the born, and birth is certain for the dead. Thus for the inevitable, it is not fitting that you grieve. So let's look at this a little bit in the parlance of today. Weapons cannot cut up this self, and it doesn't have to mean physical weapons, but people may try to cut you down to size with their words, with their actions. They may try to sting you, to harm you, and they might be able to harm your ego. Like if you do take a step forward toward your destiny, you might have people go, yeah, that's a start, but you'll never be able to keep going. Those words can cut us to the quick. And words often in our modern life are used as weapons. That can hurt the ego, but never the true self. Your true self is beyond that. Fire cannot burn up the self. So sometimes when we start our passion project, we do burn with these ideas. And we can also burn with frustration when those aren't reached. These fires could seem to sweep us away, but if we listen within to our true self, we'll be able to keep going through those flames. Water cannot make the self wet. In English, we sometimes say people get washed up. Your goals get washed up. You might find that your ego dreams and steps are washed up. But again, the true self will be the boat that carries you through. And wind making the self dry. It's said in Ayurveda, yoga's preventative care sister science, that as we get older, the air element increases within us, leading to dryness. Our skin starts to dry, gets wrinkled, it gets cracked, the hair gets more wild, the mind gets more scattered. Even the winds of age cannot harm this self. No matter what our age, even if we think it's too late, it's not too late. It's never too late. Because the true self can be affected by none of these. It is fixed. It is immovable in you. It is the first part of you that the rest of you grew up around. So knowing that, don't grieve when change presents itself, when obstacles present themselves. But even if you do go, oh my gosh, it does mean there's death in my life to follow my path. Don't worry. These other verses say that wherever there's death, there's new birth. We say in English sometimes, whenever one door closes, another one opens. And perhaps think about this in your own life when this was true. And whatever we start will come to an end. We have to be ready to embrace that as well. Birth is certain for the dead, death is certain for the born. Why grieve this? It's the cycle of life. Things change. Nothing is permanent except our truest self, the core of us, which is also said sometimes to be the core of the universe. We are the universe. So that's well and good, but what about some practical instructions? And this is where the Bhagavad Gita can really shine. I love its theoretical knowledge, but I've also really appreciated how it has been able to get me through some tough changes of life. So here, the Gita offers you ways to create change, to create those deaths that lead to births. And chapter 8 is actually all about that. Again, it can be symbolic. So I'll just give you a little heads up before we chant. That way you're not going, what are we chanting about? So in verse 25 of chapter 8, verse 25, Krishna starts giving ideas of how to die consciously to create the result you want after death. And remember, that could be physical death or any death in your life, like a retirement, for example. That could be a big death. Or going to school for the first day. That could be a big death. Oh, and especially if you're a parent of the child going to school for the first day, isn't that a bit of a death for you? There goes my baby. So, if this change happens, a yogi, that is one who strives to unite with this true self within, if they welcome change or death in smoke at night, in dark fortnight, so the time of the month, the lunar month, when the moon is waning, or when the sun heads toward the south, this is said to be more of a nighttime energy, and the yogi will return. So that means, well, first of all, that people who do yoga aren't perfect. They need practice, right? That's why you have to keep going to yoga, going to class. It's practice. But the idea is, if we look at this figuratively, if we're being passive or pessimistic when we try something, when we approach change or death, we're probably just going to go back right into our old habits, our old patterns. Okay. But if we can leave in the brightness, in the fire's our passion, in the light, in bright fortnight, when the energy of the moon is growing, so our energy is growing, or when the sun is heading north. For those of us in the northern hemisphere, the sun heads north after the winter solstice. Right now, it's heading south and the days are getting shorter. And I don't know about you, but that's making me not want to do much of anything and a little sad. And just a couple of weeks now, yay, from when this recording is made, the sun's going to start to head north again, which means it might seem far off, but spring is on the way. This is optimism. This is light, the light of ourselves, our passion. So when we can harness our passion, live in the light, harness our rising energy, our optimism, then we can change. We don't have to return. We can grow into something new, a new birth, a new level of being. Wouldn't that be cool? And think of it for yourself. If you've ever gone into a venture and you're like, this will never work, or you've helped somebody else try to achieve their dream and you've said to them, this is never going to work. Do you think it's going to make it more or less likely that change is going to happen and that this big breakthrough will come? But if you go in this with energy, with resolve, with your passion, with your optimism, maybe a little more likely for change. So let's have our final little reading here. Chapter 8, verse 24 of the more poetic translation. There's a more literal translation, and it's more literal because it will include words like yoga people know, like we'd say the gunas and tamas rajas sattva, for example. And if you don't know those words, it'd be like, so why put them in the poetic translation? But if you do know them, it could be helpful. But we're sticking with the poetic. Are you there? Chapter 8, verse 24, or just in a good place to listen. And we're going to go to verse 27. The Supreme One, by the way, is you, your Supreme Self. Okay, here we go. Those who know the Supreme One go to that Supreme if they depart in fire, in light, in bright fortnight, or when the sun is heading north. The yogi who decides to leave in smoke at night, in dark fortnight, or when the sun heads toward the south, gains lunar light and will return. These bright and dark paths of the world are thought to be immutable. The bright one brings a man release. The dark one brings a man rebirth. Knowing these two paths, Kunti's son, the yogi evades delusion. To that and at all times be thou firm in yoga, O Arjuna. Ah, nice. I hope you enjoyed that. For me, part of the challenge but fun was putting this in the poetic form because I think it really brings it to life. This wonderful writing. It started with reminding us that we'll move closer to our Supreme Self if we are optimistic, energetic, and we'll move further away and return to our old patterns if we're more pessimistic or passive. They're thought to bring you release. This is the way. You need to know these two paths. And then Kunti's son, I love it. When Krishna talks to Arjun, he'll use these nicknames. And Kunti's son is so appropriate when he's talking about death and being reborn, right? To that end, at all times be thou firm in yoga. Yoga, I mean, many of us as Westerners have this idea of yoga. I know I certainly did when I started. It was a bunch of stretches with maybe some focused breathing. The Bhagavad Gita's yoga is a little unique because it's really about the yoga of daily life, practical yoga. So this is how you change your life, but you need to be firm in it. And what that means is it's hard to start and you go, oh man, I'm starting to try to apply this in my life. I'm trying to be optimistic no matter what happens. And it's not working. So I give up. Krishna is saying here, you have to become habitual in this. You have to be firm. It has to become your new pattern of thinking because so many of us default to the pessimistic, right? A little challenge like, oh, what was I thinking? It's never going to happen. And if we can develop this mindset of whatever happens, it's for the best. Whatever happens, it's for the best. Then our life changes. And maybe I always say, think of people in your life that, think of people who are perennially pessimistic. Do you like to be around them? And how do you feel? And how does their life turn out? As opposed to those who are perpetually light and seeing the best. Do you want to be around those people? Do you want to be those people? And how is their life turning out for them? So being firm in yoga, that's the idea of practice. We just have to practice. We do our stretches so we feel better in our body, more optimistic about our health. We do our breath work to feel more optimistic about our mind. We can do yoga to feel more optimistic about our whole life off the mat as well. I'm going to take off my festive little party beads. These are not meant to be malas. They're just like, yay, it's a birthday. It's your birthday. If you practice yoga with the Bhagavad Gita, you can have 365 birthdays a year, except for leap year, and then you get a bonus one, right? Or maybe take the day off. Every day can be a birthday. You can celebrate every day with optimism that you are moving toward your best possible life. I hope you found this enjoyable. Remember, you're welcome to leave comments. We're coming to the end, so if you type something in the chat now, I don't know that I'll be able to see it. But I'd love to reconnect with you again. If you did enjoy this, please let me know. Perhaps we'll have more in the coming year. Also, I'd love it if you looked at the books and see what they can do for you. They've done so much for me, and I really think that they could change the world, because if we get more people in the West in this time when so many of us are pessimistic, if we can get the energy level up, what could we accomplish? What could we do for the world? What could we do for other people, humanity? What could we do for ourselves, our families? So the website, and I think I'll put this in the comments later. Welcomingdestiny.com, welcomingdestiny.com, right? Under resources, the Song of Your Soul, more events, a free chapter of the book. You can also look there for classes, workshops, other ways we can interact. You can contact me through that as well. So do watch for more. I'd love to hear from you and connect to you. And I thank you so much. Oh, I do see something. Thank you, Deb. I'm appreciative of you. You're one of my inspirations. You all are my inspiration. Have a wonderful rest of whatever comes next, and see you soon. This is Atmadarshan. Bye.